So guys, okay.
Okay, so folks, you're very, very welcome to Dirty Salad Club this morning from what is a very bright, chilly autumnal morning in Dublin. I hope it's nice wherever you are as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very mindful that busy season is back after the summer and people are really getting back into the swing of things work-wise. So we're very grateful that you've chosen to spend some time with us this morning. And we hope you both enjoy yourselves and take away some nuggets from our conversations and our time together over the next 45 minutes or so. And for anyone who, if it's your first time here, Dirty Salad Club is a place for people who love people, people who work with people to get together and to learn. So we're a community of psychologists, HR professionals, L&D professionals, coaches. We get together once a month and we pick a topic where we have a discussion together, we share our learnings, share our insights, and hopefully all go away, maybe having met someone new and having taken some knowledge and, as I say, insights with us as well. So this morning we're talking about all things hybrid, and we have our very own Alan Lyons as our host. And I know to some of you here this morning, Alan will need no introduction, you know him well. But for anybody who doesn't know Alan, Alan's our managing director here at Kinch Lyons. He's a chartered psychologist and executive coach, and he spends a lot of his ample time and energy and focus helping to develop and to sustain high-performing teams. Alan has a wealth of knowledge in so many things that are really relevant to the world of post-pandemic work, of hybrid work, things like psychological safety, like trust, humor, communication. And he also has a wonderful way of sharing his knowledge with energy, with grace, with humor. So really looking forward to today's session with Alan. So without further ado, Alan, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thanks for some introduction. I appreciate that. But please feel free. I know I have slides up, but I'm aware when the slides are up, as I always say, it's a bit like being in the pub. You stare at them, but you don't interact. But feel free, because the whole idea of this is for us to have a chat. So come off mute at any stage. And you can see there it says, the culture that got you here won't get you there. And you see what I did there, it's punning off there. What got you here won't get you there. But really, this is really important because the reason there's such a car crash with hybrid working now is there's so many ways, there's so many choices of what to do. This is kind of, it makes me think of Barry Schwartz, the paradox of choice. And that's what it is, but it's about then becoming aware and having those conversations around that. In many ways, there isn't any such thing as an organization, which sounds a bit daft, but actually it's just the organization of people. And that's why it's so important really to focus on this now. So look, there's so much being done on this space before even the pandemic hit. This is the work of Linda Grattan, who you might know, London School of Economics. She's pioneering in hybrid. In fact, she was singing from the rooftops way before the pandemic about how we can actually change our relationship with work, make ourselves healthier and make ourselves stronger and performing. However, people would sit through her kind of slide deck in organizations, go, that's interesting, but nothing was really done about it. Nobody followed through. They just there was a knowing doing gap. And in many ways, her time has now come. She wrote a great article for, and we can post that, how to get hybrid right. And it's looking at, this, working ranges over place and time. And where is the best way to do it? When should you come together? She breaks it up into synchronous and asynchronous work. So we have to be together. When do we do that? But also the benefit of being able to work from home, etc. I often think of the CEO of Microsoft. He was talking about Microsoft did in 6 months of digital transformation what they couldn't have done in 6 years. Well, it's the same thing that we're actually experiencing now in the workplace. We can actually accelerate the way our relationship with work a lot quicker than we ever thought possible. And that's why you saw that whole great resignation thing coming out, where people were actually saying they're going to quit. Well, actually what it was, potentially, the resigning hasn't happened, but it's basically people reevaluating their relationship with work and how we want to do it. People have had a little bit of distance from their boss, and that's made a huge psychological difference to them, which is really interesting. Now, I'm going to look at maybe what the best in class practice is, which is, kind of from the academic side, and then actually what's happening on the ground. And we can have a conversation about what your experience of it, but what else we can do about that. So this is Linda Grattan here. She's great. her article, now she's written books, co-creating a new hybrid working, but she dispels a couple of things we have to look at if we want to get hybrid right. And the first thing she looks at is around jobs and tasks, and very much look at, well, which ones are, can be done on your own, asynchronous, and which ones should we look at being synchronous, and where do they stop, and where do we have to be in the office for them, where are they best done at home, etc. And employee preferences is a really interesting one, because that is often ignored. And what's also interesting to remember that people have changed since 2019. So we can't just come back and do a copy and paste job of what it was potentially like. People's preferences, because their experiences have changed. Now, we can use that in a positive way, or we can actually just pretend that that hasn't happened. And the old school controlling boss who just wants it back to how it was. But it's really interesting to have people voice in there. Look at projects and workflows. Use this as a time to spring clean. Don't just, copy and paste office life onto online, but look at potentially some meetings now which have become irrelevant. Daniel Pink, who wrote Drive, and that he was writing about this yesterday online. He was mentioning an article as well. He was reading the Harvard Business Review going, it's time now to cut out the noise in the offices, because we've had this little shake where we can all press pause and go, well, where are the unnecessary meetings? Which bits of the workflow can we actually adapt now? Use it as a time to spring clean. And it's really important that we focus on the inclusion and fairness thing, because if not, what happens is people will exhume proximity bias. They won't see it as fair. They don't see how decisions are made. And you could be doing it as a leader with a good intent, but if people don't know how the decisions are made, they'll always read into it in the negative. So it's so important that leaders role model the right behaviors as well. And if you are looking at hybrid working, for instance, one of the things that, if we're saying it's a hybrid model in the workplace, but then the CEO comes in every day, well, that's not a hybrid workforce, because everybody will take their lead from the lead. Or indeed, if you say that everybody's happy to return to the workplace, well, that's also an indication that you're not living in a psychologically safe workplace, because it's not the truth, So it's about actually how do we actually step into that, because a lot of the rules that have been made now is that they're based on basically what 3% do wrong. So we're actually looking at stamping out what we don't want to happen, rather than actually looking at what the majority are doing, and how can we actually use positive psychology. So rather than leaning into that, and this is what people do, they look at what we're losing in organizations, the pains, rather than actually stepping back and go, well, what are we gaining as well? So I'll post some references on Linda Grattan, but there's a lot of noise and a lot of research out there. This lady is the best. Okay, I said she's been doing it for a long time. Now, what's interesting as well, if we look at the lady who came up with the whole psychological safety, Amy Edmondson, that came from Project Aristotle, which was a study they did in Google, where they were trying to see what do our best teams do differently. And they discovered, after years of looking at them, Google are great at looking at data, it was the teams that took time out to create their own ways of working, and there was social sensitivity and equality of distribution of speaking time. They found loads of things, but actually what made them the best teams was the fact that they took time out together to go, how do we want to work together? Now, being psychologists love constructs, but it sits nicely into the construct of psychological safety, for people are comfortable being themselves. And the reason that is because they've had skin in the game about coming up with how they want to work. Now, Amy Edmondson, she's kind of popularized this space because she named it, I suppose, as well. But she's talking about the importance of psychological safety now is even more important. And she said it's the difference between silence and participation. Edmondson stated distributed work, which a lot of us are in now, makes us realize we have to be more deliberately more proactive and open. And in a way, we now have to, it's very, as we say, you can't, online, it leads to groupthink. So you nearly have to be deliberate and intentional about getting engagement, and there's little things about this, those little loose ties and interactions that we took for granted, they've been lost. We said working from home went from feeling like a perk to all of a sudden you felt trapped. So how do you actually make it sure that we deliberately create psychological safety? Because you can't create it online, or it's very difficult. Because one thing we saw during the pandemic was actually bosses didn't believe that people could be trusted to perform at a level if they were working remotely. And that's the truth. And that's what happened. That's why they never instigated Linda Grattan's work, etc. But now what happens is we've had the experience together and they realize it did actually happen. People's performance was actually, in many cases, even enhanced. Now, there was reasons for that because we were restricted in movement. I know for myself, it was either that or to get involved in homeschooling. So it was easier to not do that. But that it is the truth, performance went up. However, psychological safety, the feeling of connectivity, well-being, and all of that stuff that will impact retention tax, that went down and that's dipped because we have to be even more intentional about it now. It won't just emerge. And that's where Amy Edmondson is talking about there. And it's some great research also from Gartner. And Gartner shows that teams of knowledge workers, which we all are, who collaborate intentionally are nearly 3 times more likely to achieve high team innovations than teams that do not use an intentional approach. So it's now even more important than ever to actually do this, because as I was saying to you, Zoom and even this format, it leads to groupthink. People don't say what they think. It also leads to most people online multitask. Now, maybe not in a short little chat like this, but if you're on a meeting all the time, we multitask all the time. So you need to be intentional and create rituals, which I look at with you now, around how to be create psychological safety. And this is Daniel Pink again was writing about this only yesterday. But rituals are an effective way to build a remote team psychological safety. So we should be looking at, I suppose, when we're in the office, the worst thing is actually be mandated to go back into the office, and all you do anyway is sit on Teams. You're just online in meetings. They were talking about the office now should be seen nearly as a new offsite. When you're in there, you're intentionally creating those collaborative touch points. So you can have this innovation and, kind of spark off each other. It's really interesting as well. They were looking at measurements for anxiety and isolation. And one of them was, new measurements for the new hybrid way of working. Have you got someone that you can share a joke with at work? And they're indicating that if you don't, you potentially could be an item or could be contributory to a sense of isolation. But that is really interesting from what we're trying to achieve in terms of those rituals, make people feel belong, make them feel connected. Now, there's many of them, and most people don't. They just go straight into a meeting and make it transactional. They just talk about what they have to talk about, but they're not building any psychological safety. What I found, what I'd like to, I want to stop now because I know I've been talking after, actually probably ask you, is there any rituals that you've seen used, or indeed you've used yourself with greater impact? One of my favorite ones that I personally use is called positive gossiping, whereby before we kick off a meeting, we share something that's been going well. And your brain loves it. The amygdala goes calm, you infuse it. People are much more likely to be engaged throughout the meeting if we actually press pause. Now, it's called appreciative inquiry, it's called success gossiping, whatever. But it's really pressing pause to acknowledge something that's gone well since we were last together. That's a great way, a great ritual as well. And it just takes a second, but we need to actually be deliberate. And this is what Amy Edmondson is talking about. Build these new rituals in so people feel psychologically safe. Benefit for the organization is people feel more connected, they're more involved with the purpose, etc. I saw in Microsoft, what they've done is they've started usually, if it's online, they select a facilitator who's not in the room to run a hybrid meeting. So it's often the people who dial in, feel this, they're, even if something funny happens in the room, they don't really view it. They're not really involved. So they always kind of feel like the outsider. So it's actually how to use that. And what they do is very clever. Is they get one of the people who are zooming in or on Teams from outline to be the moderator or the facilitator. That's a really good technique. And there's loads of other little rituals. I want to hear from you as well. And just to show you the psychology of this, there's a lovely lady who you probably know, Nancy Klein. And a lot of her work is, again, coming to the fore now with this hybrid work. But she said people think better throughout the meeting if the very first thing they do is to say something true and positive about their work or how that of their team is going. So you can see the positive. And if you look at the Gallup, the Gallup 12 engagement questions, one of them is, have you received appreciative feedback for something you've done in the last 7 days? Now, I know normally when you say that, people laugh to go 7 days, try 7 years. But the interesting about that is that one question, if you answer yes to it, is more predictive that you're actually on a high-performing team. So they have lots of data on it. So if you can answer yes to that, you're more likely that you are in a high-performing team. So all of this research has been there, from Nancy Klein to Amy Edmondson to Linda Grattan, Daniel Pink, but it's probably more important now than ever that we're intentional to use it, to go after that feeling of people feeling connected. But let me just stop my share for a second and have a look at everyone and actually ask anybody here, is there any rituals that you found helpful or that you've used or that you've even seen not go so well? Would anybody, I was going to do breakout groups, but I thought we'd all stay together and have a chat. That ritual of a breakout groups, people have stopped, they kind of drop offline. Anne, were you going to say something?
I was going to show you, but I don't know if you'll be able to see it. So we've always had a WhatsApp group, but through the pandemic, it became much more. Can you see that? Probably not. Anyway, it's Rachel's birthday today in our team. And so you know, the first one came through at 10 o'clock, and you know, everyone's just commenting and wishing her a happy birthday. And I think the WhatsApp group for our team is much more active since the pandemic, and we've intentionally kept it going, so people will share little bits, and usually not anything work related, but it's just a nice connection.
But and that's the thing. I mean, what they found with the Project Aristotle was that social sensitivity, which was the most important bit, wasn't actually really work related, but you get to know each other outside your job descriptions. And it's very little time to do that now, because when we press a button, we're all gone. So those things are even more important now.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else use something that you found helpful for engagement or that you enjoy? Billy.
So I was going to say, Alan, one of the things is actually using warm-ups. And I don't just mean like a getting to know you, different than an icebreaker. You know, an icebreaker is getting to know each other, a team who's already intact. But actually a warm-up that's kind of related to what you're going to do. So if you're doing a team session on brainstorming, something related to the topic, but just get people in the zone up front, and a warm-up, get that energy up in the first few minutes can work really well.
It's so important. And when you infuse the positive emotion, people are much more likely to feel psychological safety. And that's what you're doing. You're making them feel comfortable. Anybody else?
Hi, Alan. What I like to do now, normally I'm one-to-one, but even in kind of larger groups, I find it very grounding, just in terms of, you know, asking people where they're calling in from and what the weather is out there, and it just kind of helps, even though, because there is obviously the distance across screens, but I find then just that's like an easy, safe discussion that I think it, and it's very neutral. It's not asking people where they're from, which we need to be really careful about.
Which Irish people are shocked at that.
Asking where are they currently based.
Love that. But all of these things now, I know we're all OD nerds, but all of these things are so important for, you know, they actually speed up and make the meetings more engaging and higher performance. There's a big win from them. Hey, Laura, were you coming off there? Good to see you.
Hey, Alan, how are you?
Good.
Yeah, so we're going to try and I'm definitely going to butcher what this is called, but it's a Pecha, so PECHA-CHUA, but it's basically a PowerPoint slide. Everyone has their own, where they kind of add their own pictures of stuff that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
And you've got 3 minutes and we're rotating through the team. So it's like a safe topic for everyone to kind of talk about, and kind of gives you a bit of an insight into who they are as a person.
Love that.
We're trying it out. We'll see how it goes. But it's just something different.
No, it's brilliant. And if you look at, you know, when we always do kind of the leadership timeline or the philosophy, it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? And people love that. They really you actually feel more connected once you know what somebody does outside their job description as a leader. You know, you're more engaged with them. So that's really powerful. And Laura, what are you going to put in your own one?
My one is such a mixed bag. There's no way I'm going to fit it all into 3 minutes.
No, we should actually you should lead a Dirty Salad Club on it. We should all do one. That'd be cool. Thanks, Laura. Anybody else like to share one?
This is more for one-on-ones and in person, but Annika and I go for hot chocolate every Monday in the office, but it's just a nice, well, look, the hot chocolate in and of itself is a lovely thing. It's warming, it's comforting, there's feel-good chemicals in the brain, but it's also just a nice kind of reminder of the things that are nice to do when you can get together with somebody in person. It's a nice way to kick off that day, I think.
And what, you know, when people listen to this, they might go, geez, it's all very positive. But here's the thing. You don't have to worry about being negative. You don't have to worry about negative emotions because they come at you all the time. You do have to worry about instilling positivity, positive emotions. And that's why you do this. And this is the real value in this. You can't be innovative and creative and have a growth mindset and all that good stuff unless you infuse a sense of energy like that. You know, so it's not because people go, it's a happy clappy. It's not, we have lots of negativity, but we just don't go after it because it comes after us. But you have to be intentional. And this actually, I was reminded of this, Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology. He opened up the positive psychology health wing in the Royal College of Surgeons during the pandemic. They gave him a fellowship. But what was interesting was he did his original study in the 70s on learned helplessness. Why do some kids fall behind? And a lot of education psychology still works in that. And what they noticed was, or what they did was classic psychology, they blamed the teachers and the parents, you know, for giving unconscious cues to the kid. You know, you mightn't ask Alan a question because I don't think he's done his homework. So I ask Susan instead, but then I think I'm stupid and I don't try. So we've always blamed other people. But actually what he noticed was in his younger years now, it was never learned. We default to that. We all do that. We all have a negativity bias. So what we're trying to do is, and especially sitting at home, you'll have it. So what we're trying to do is intentionally, and it's what Amy Edmondson has talked about, we have to even be more intentional. So all of these techniques we're talking about, you know, you might have used it kind of as an icebreaker, you know, as a facilitator, but now all meetings need to have them. And keep it as a ritual. We know that every week we're going to tip off doing that. And it will help people feel more engaged and they'll interact more in the meetings. And we have that data from Microsoft Insights now. They'll show you that because they have all, you know, we're using Teams. People who kick off with a ritual are more likely to see a higher performance, and they measure that with the data analytics from their engagement surveys. And then another interesting one in terms of meeting overloads now, people who attend more meetings, and Microsoft have the data on that, score lower on engagement surveys. And if you think about it, meetings now shouldn't be about just updating and sharing information. That's gone. That's noise. We can do that without being in meetings. This time should be way more valuable. You know, and that's if you're doing the spring cleaning rather than just copying and pasting. Really powerful. Okay, let me go back to my dreaded slides, but feel free to interrupt me. Hope it's not another picture of me. That gave me negative emotion when I kicked off. Okay, so here's some top tips for me. So the 6-second rule. And I was trying to apply it there, but a lot of you are psychologists as well. But, you know, when you're online, especially, we do a thing in microanalysis and therapeutic dialogue. When you ask somebody a question, they can, especially if it's a well-meaning question that got them thinking, it can take them up to 6 seconds to answer you. So normally they think for 6 seconds, and they look away. And then they come back and they look at you and you look away for a second. It's called grounding the sequence of communication and come back. But we allow the space of 6 seconds. But online, with Zoom fatigue, we're just staring people in the eyes. We very rarely, when we ask a question, we move on so quickly. And they nearly expect us to do that. So try the 6-second rule. Actually, when I'm coaching people online and they don't answer, it feels longer. But I literally count 1, 2, and I promise you, and the same with facilitation and team coaching, somebody will always say something before 6 seconds is up. It's a lovely rule. And then that's what I was just saying there. Updates and information sharing don't require a meeting anymore. So that's how we can really benefit from what we're looking at. But it's all, leadership is just a bunch of talk. And it's so important to have everybody's voice in that. So I love this from Michael Lewis. He's the behavioral scientist. He wrote Moneyball and he wrote a book on Trump as well. Most people have now. But he said, whenever he told people that had 90% chance of surviving surgery, he said 82% of patients opted for it. But when you told them that they had 10% chance of dying from the surgery, which of course, just a different way of putting the same odds, only 54% chose it. So it's so important to look. Freud said words were originally magic. Well, they still are. And we can transform our own experience and that of others by actually how we use language. And that's what we've just been talking about there. Now, another guy who I'm a big fan of, Malcolm Gladwell, he got himself in a bit of trouble recently talking about hybrid. Because really what he was saying was, younger people, you're missing out by not being in the office. And people went, Jesus, with all the research, you're so draconian. You know, it's not about being in the office. It's about, but I think in mid-career, but what he was really saying was, you're missing the connections, you're missing the networks, etc. So you have to be deliberate about it. But his biggest rant was also the fact that he said, it's a hassle coming into the office, but if you're sitting in your PJs in your bedroom, is that the work life you want to live? He states he's getting frustrated with leadership inability to explain this effectively. And that's where I took from, it's all about how you explain it, is that most leaders are telling people that they want to see them back in the office, but they're not giving a good why behind the what. People have discovered that working from home works. They have to then also sell the virtues, give it a strong reason of why you want to come back into the workplace rather than just mandating it. And I think that's where, to defend Gladwell, that's what he's really talking about. They're not communicating it well. What they are communicating is, we don't necessarily trust you. You saw that recently with Apple, whereby Tim Cook, and they were very progressive. They ran into a lot of trouble. Their employees wrote a letter to them, signed by hundreds of them. I suppose safety is the number. But they said at the end of it, please get out of our way. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Let us decide how we work best and let us do the best work of our lives. And this is what I was saying to you earlier. Too many times leaders, they make assumptions about employees, not actual performance, and they drive the workplace rules. So that's why we have most rules are based around the offenders, which are 3%. But they end up punishing the whole 97%. And I think that's where the Apple employees were just getting so angry. This guy kind of made well, he in fairness to him, David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, he's been driven to vengeance. He wants people back in yesterday. In fact, he actually said he was hoping that there would be a recession because it would loosen the bargaining chip of his employees. So he'd prefer a recession over not. So he wants people back in the office yesterday, but he doesn't. What he potentially not recognizing is that people have changed, that the relationship of work has changed. You can't just mandate them. And actually what you find, as I said there, when fearful CEOs talk about workplace culture, and that's what they'll say, you're breaking our culture, but they're really fearful is actually, they're talking about workplace control. It took me a while to realize this. They keep mentioning workplace culture, and I said, but actually it's not. What they're really mentioning is they feel a lack of control. So what you'll find is with the pandemic and leadership is that it's revealing people's leadership style. And in fact, if you had a knowledge age working, psychological safe culture in place, those companies have found hybrid working a hell of a lot easier than if you had an old-fashioned control and command culture. They're the ones that are really struggling, and they're the ones that are losing people, because all this pandemic has helped people do is actually reveal your leadership style. And I think this guy is a perfect example of that. This is, by the way, why is he DJing? He was even trying to, in fairness to him, get people back into the office. So he was throwing together these parties in the afternoon, like how cool it is to come in, free champagne, and he got some of the biggest bands, etc. But it's not workplace culture these guys are talking about at all. It's for us as OD professionals, it's interesting. Listen to it. It's workplace control they're really talking about, which brought me back with my nerdy OD head to go, well, actually, if we look at this from motivational theory, it's more about theory X manager beliefs and theory Y. You remember McGregor, one of the motivations. Theory X is you generally believe people have to be watched. Theory Y, obviously, is the extreme opposite. And you'll actually find that the companies that are struggling most actually have leaders like David Coleman, who's potentially a theory X manager. And the companies, and also they're the companies, by the way, proximity bias is, in some organization is going to get worse if it's a Tier X company versus the Tier Y, which is very interesting. It's revealing the control and command leadership. That's why they're struggling. If there wasn't trust, you control and command, you don't trust people, you try and control them. So then obviously when hybrid happens, it's driving them demented, these old school managers, and you can see why. Now, it's also impacting, and we've got some good data on this, emotional intelligence. And it's actually, it's interesting because it's there's a do-gooder fatigue kicking in as well, whereby people are kind of comfortable doing kind of well-being conversations, talking about flexibility. But now people are kind of, just like David, I'll just get them back in. I'm better pretending that I care, as it were. But there's interesting insight from what's happened to emotional intelligence, which I wasn't expecting. So they've done time 1, time 2. So a data set of lots of leaders from before the pandemic and now to see shifts. And the shifts really surprised me. And here, I showed them to you. Here's some trending changes in the scores. What's enhanced, a lot of leaders through this have actually enhanced their self-regard. They're more confident, they're more assertive in what they want, and they have higher levels of stress tolerance. Now, you might be thinking, wow, more stress tolerance. I thought it was a very stressful period for them. But actually what's happening is here, because they got through the pandemic, it's actually bolstered. It there's a bond in that, they're more confident in what they can achieve. And also they're more assertive in what they want, and their self-regard, their self-efficacy, all that good stuff's up. And that makes sense. Now, what's dipped, which kind of surprised me, was empathy has dipped. And you would have thought, well, we're all in this together, we're not being empathic. It's that kind of do-gooder fatigue. And emotional self-awareness is dipped because we're just talking to each other online. We're not spending as much time with each other. So we're actually less aware of what other people are going through and how to leverage that. So actually, if you look at this from our perspective, guys, people potentially have got better at self-leadership, which is obviously great. However, leading others has dipped, which is very telling. And also, leaders generally are okay, to be honest with you. It's the squeezed middle managers who are actually the ones who are resigning, not leaders. Leaders kind of feel a bit comfortable because it's been left to the managers to deal with this new way of working. Managers are suddenly being asked, not only do you have to manage the way you used to manage, but then we want you to take care of psychological safety. We want you to have well-being conversations. We want you to watch out for proximity bias, put in the flexibility, all of this stuff. They go, Jesus Christ, I never signed up for this. And they kind of feel like they're being mini therapists, but they also feel ill-equipped. They've just been parachuted into kind of how do you measure metrics from remote working, etc. And that's why this is an interesting stat from a recent CMI survey that said about 60% of UK managers did not feel they had adequate training in how to manage remote workers. And that's why they're burning out. The leaders, I struggled to understand this at first. The leaders are fine. It's the managers who are actually struggling. And it's a big piece actually just I saw in Harvard Business Review on that recently. Now, so what to do about it? Well, mandating, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Mandating office workers versus no hybrid working policies. It talks about risk at both ends of the spectrum. So you have people who have been like David Solomon, and then the other people who are just been left to make it up as they want. Now, what's interesting is neither end of the spectrum is proven to be working. The real strict one, the Goldman Sachs versus the do what you like one, neither extreme is working in our polarized world. Actually, it's interesting, the Gallup engagement where we normally have, they do every year, you normally get normal bell curve. Well, actually, for the first time ever in that data, they've had a phenomenal amount of people scoring 10 than they've ever had before. I think they're very happy, very engaged. This new way of working really suits me. And then a phenomenal amount of people who are scoring 1, which is, I hate this, it's isolating. I'm really not feeling connected. I don't want to work here. So it's actually kind of more like a camel shape rather than a bell curve. But then if we borrow from the good world of Buddhism, they say in the same way as you tune the string of your instruments, so you should hold your mind in meditation, not too tight, not too loose. And I was mindful of this as well, is that you don't want to be too tight and you don't want to be too loose. And that's why mandating versus working, just something in the middle. Well, the good people of the behavioural insights team who advised the UK government and that they did all the nudges, they've come up with a lovely bit of research on how to use behavioural science to make sure that it's not too tight, not too loose. So how should organizations go about implementing work from home office policies? Well, first of all, they talk about have a clear policy. Okay, so the mandate is very clear, but actually what is shown is if there's a really loose one, the attrition rates are just as high. People don't like that. They feel less engaged. They feel like people don't actually care. There's no attention to it. So it actually has equally a demotivating effect, which kind of, might surprise you. As some people actually like being mandated, but having no policy around it is where look, Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, have a clear purpose. And if there's no purpose, it doesn't mean it doesn't be tweaked, but you need to have a flight plan. The next thing they said, acknowledge the changing role of line managers. And that's what I've just been talking about. They might have even done training before the pandemic, and they're thinking, Jesus, I'm not up for this. And I've just been through a management training program, because it was kind of a lot of the stuff they were trained on is now irrelevant. Not irrelevant, but they need new skills, should I say. The ones we're talking about there in terms of flexibility, how to measure, how to keep engagement, how to create psychological safety, how to measure, because most people don't know how other people are getting on. The British Psychological Society had this as well, whereby they did a lovely research to show that most people will not ask for help from a manager on Teams, on Zoom, or even on the phone, but they will in person. So we're losing that social sensitivity with people, but it's about acknowledging it and also equipping them to be able to put metrics around performance for remote workers, having anchor days, but helping them co-create those team charters, those new team charters, like they did in like Google did with Amy Edmondson's work. Well, they need to be new ones now, surely. And we need to equip managers and even acknowledge that the leaders are actually getting off a bit here. It's the manager's life has changes. And this is the big one. Use nudges over mandates. Mandates, you know yourself, people will do willing compliance, but that's not a workforce that you want, that you should be proud of for knowledge age workers. I think one of the nicest nudges you can use as well is FOMO. You know, fear of missing out, as my daughter would say. She has huge FOMO, you know, but I mean, make it actually something exciting. Like, you got to have something that people are willing to give up their flexibility of having breakfast with the kids into peak time traffic, you know, losing hours, not being able to pick up a rugby match or football game. So what is that? How could you make it? And that's what we're saying. Offices now need to be nearly seen as offsites when you get there. You're not just going in there to sit on Teams or, you know, do business or do the office life online for the people who aren't there. So make sure that you use nudges, use FOMO, but use little things. Don't go for a big mandation thing. And then lastly, it talks about you have to apply principles of organizational justice. If people don't perceive it as fair, and if people working remotely don't know how decisions are made, even though they're being made in good faith, well, you know, that obviously leads to people thinking it's not fair, it's unjust, and that's where retention is going to kick in. So there's some lovely little behavioral insights team. They're a wonderful organization. But also remember, and this is it, you can take things so seriously that you miss things. And I was thinking about this. I was even thinking this fella here, he was allowed to a business call. He's a Lego marketing manager with his daughter he was homeschooling at the time, if he allowed her to give a little pedicure to him. So he kind of had a trade-off, you know. But, you know, it's even about getting comfortable and sharing these vulnerable moments with each other. I remember, do you remember before the pandemic, there was a news correspondent in BBC, I think he was in Asia somewhere, Singapore somewhere, and his daughter came in, and then his wife actually came in to grab the daughter out. And it was even on the news headlines going, wasn't that amazing? First of all, everybody thought the daughter was, that his wife was a maid because she was Asian. So that was the first unconscious bias, which is interesting. But even now, that wouldn't make the news now in terms of, wow, did you see him being interrupted? We've all got used to that, you know. We've even stopped, you know, people used to have all their bookshelves and spend ages getting all the clever books, you know, the shelf esteem, you know, making sure that none of them were read. Just, it was all about perception. Now it's a lot more fluid. Nobody cares. You know, you can just turn up. It's not even, you know, but it's interesting. Just remember these moments and share the funny moments we've had with each other, being vulnerable at home. There's one here I want to share with you. Do you remember this one? I hope it shared the sound too. Can you let me know if you can hear this?
Can you hear me, Judge? I did not know that Zoom could turn me into a cat, and I did not know that a cat Zoom could turn me into an internet celebrity, but it all happened in just a matter of hours.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take a look.
Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
Okay. And it went on, if you remember that one. But this is the other thing I get to do, and it's a bit like the rituals thing, getting everybody at kind of the lowest board as well to share a working from home epic fail, which you've all had. It makes people be more vulnerable, it makes you lighten up, it makes you feel like, you know, the whole authentic leadership thing, you can be yourself more with skill. It infuses a growth mindset, etc. So let me just stop there and see if anybody, well, this is really putting you on the spot, but if anybody'd like to share an epic working from home fail, or if it's more comfortable, you can tell me one about it you heard from a friend. They're probably better. If you heard about a friend who had an epic fail. Laura, you're great.
I have one. So I used to live at home with my parents, and my mum's probably not the most technology savvy person, so she doesn't actually understand where what like the camera can see. So there was a mirror behind me. She came into the room, so like the camera, you could pick her up in the mirror. I was like, oh, I'm on a call, and she just panicked and dropped to the floor, and like I crawled out. And I was like, okay. But the person that I was on a call to spotted the whole thing.
Yeah,
She was
yeah.
like, what happened?
Oh, that's beautiful.
I was like, I'm just going to need to keep going. I was like,
Yeah.
we can talk about this later.
Yeah.
We just have to keep going.
Yeah.
But
And you
yeah.
say, Mum, you know I don't work for the CIA. It's okay.
Yeah. It was also like, it's totally fine to come in and say hi.
Yeah. What a cup of tea, Bess. Yeah.
You don't need to crawl out of like your own house. It's fine.
That's beautiful. That's great. Thanks, Laura. That's great. Anybody else? Tara?
Before I had my office redesigned for it, now I'm facing, backing onto a wall. I was in the early days of the pandemic with my back to the door. So my husband walked into a team meeting in his jocks. Kind of early doors now, in fairness. 2020.
And did he drop to the floor? They probably kept going.
The other people on the call probably dropped to the floor.
Thanks, Sarah. That's wonderful. Brilliant. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was on a call. It was the early days of COVID as well, and there was an issue going on. So it was kind of heated. There was 2 different departments on the call, so it was like maybe 7, 8, 9 people on the call, and it was a bit heated, kind of going over and back as to who caused this issue. And one of the women who was on the line, her husband was going out the door, and he just kind of roared in. He was like, "I'm going now, love you," and walked out. And it just completely broke the ice. Everyone just started laughing, even though everyone was like quite irate with each other up to that point.
Yeah.
It was very
Oh, brilliant. Well, there you go. But it's so important because you can take things so seriously, miss things. And actually by loosening up just like those, it would probably really help the meeting.
It did, yeah. It actually brought it down a few octaves, like, which was needed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's our job in a way, guys. But we have to, there's so many people are, a little bit paranoid, not feeling very confident, psychologically safe. So all of that stuff at home is in the opposite, the thinking traps we fall into. So it's so important. Thanks, Teresa. Anybody else? Or it could be anything. Anybody else will share one. It could be anything else.
It just reminds me, Alan, of and this absolutely, just in case anyone thinks I'm hiding behind it, this happened to a friend. It absolutely, clearly, and categorically did not.
You're always doing this, Dave.
No, but I was on just when you say, Tara, about your husband there, it just reminded me of pre-pandemic. So, like, in the coaching world, we've probably had more exposure to video calls, online calls, a lot earlier than let's say the wider world. But I was on one of the training calls one evening, and whatever group we were in, and like the usual craziness going on at home. So I'd be making the dinner, but listening to the call, make sure you have your cameras turned off. But one other participant on the call clearly did not, understand maybe, or did not get as far as realizing that the camera was on, but took the laptop into the bathroom and had a full shower.
Thank God you said shower.
And you just like clearly was just listening to the call, and everybody does that. But it's just, and then but there's no, absolutely, you can't call out because they're, you don't want to draw attention to it. Everyone can see it. There's no way you can't message them because they're away from the screen. It was just like, just have to literally pretend you didn't see it and just keep going. It was just strange, but it's funny. But now there's no way that would ever happen. But at the start of the pandemic, those kind of things were happening in every organization. So it's kind of nice to remember that was actually real life then.
Well, look, I'm conscious we're at the time, so I'm going to put up just what's next, Tanya. Is that right? And then we'll stay on anyway. But just to be mindful of people's time, 2 seconds. I'll show you who is up next. So do keep in touch. And I know I went through a lot there, from the behavioral insights to Linda Grattan and all that. So I'll upload the relevant articles that I think are most helpful for it. And then next. So Tanya, do you want to bring us to this?
Yeah, so next month we're meeting on the 12th of October, Wednesday again at 11 o'clock Irish time. And Ronan Kearney, the lovely Ronan Kearney, who's the head of L&D for Canada Life, is joining us. He's talking from his own practical experience in Canada Life and from research that he undertook as part of his recent master's in psychology. He's looking at the concept of flow in the workplace. So the idea of employees being in the flow, that state where they're really kind of enjoying, really focused, really engaged in the tasks that they're doing, and how management and leadership can support that flow and support employees' well-being overall. So that's next month, 12th of October, but all of the details of that upcoming session, recording of today's session, those articles Alan mentioned, slides from today's session will all be up on the Dirty Salad Club LinkedIn page by early next week. So keep an eye out for that, and I'll email everybody as well.
And that
link to book for next month.
That one, Tanya, is very relevant. You know, languishing, the whole thing that Alan Grant made famous. You know, the forgotten middle child of mental health. You know, we're not feeling shocking, but I'm not feeling flourishing. I'm in the middle, languishing, which most of us. He wrote an article in the New York Times for it. But how to get out of languishing was to identify and notice flow. So that'd be so relevant to that. And actually, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the amazing psychologist who came up with the flow, he died during the pandemic as well. There's a lovely obituary about him by Martin Seligman in the New York Times. So that's so topical. And it's something that Ronan's actually implementing in Canada Life at the moment. So it's lovely.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you all very much for joining us, and keep in touch.
Thank you, Alan. I hope everybody has enjoyed that.
Thank you, Alan.
Nuggets from us, and we'll be in touch and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye for now, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ali.
Bye, folks.